It was supposed to be the perfect escape. Emily and her boyfriend, Chris, had been driving for hours along the desolate highways of Nevada. Their plan was simple: cheap motels, fast food, and endless desert roads until they reached California. By nightfall, exhaustion hit. They passed one small town after another, but everything looked abandoned. Gas stations shuttered, neon signs flickering with broken bulbs. Eventually, they spotted a glowing sign in the distance: Pine Hollow Motel, vacancy. The place looked old, but functional: faded paint, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a lobby that smelled faintly of bleach. Behind the counter stood a thin, pale man with greasy hair and an unsettling smile. "Room for two?" he asked. His voice was low, almost too soft to hear. Chris nodded, signing the ledger. Emily glanced at the book. It was filled with names, but many were crossed out in thick black ink. The man handed them a rusty key. "Room 6, end of the hall." They thanked him and carried their bags down the dim corridor. The motel felt wrong. The wallpaper peeled in strips. The carpet smelled damp, and every door they passed seemed slightly ajar, like someone had just gone inside. Room 6 was no better. The bedspread was stained, the air stale, but they were too tired to complain. As Emily drifted toward sleep, she heard something: a faint knock, 3 times, on their door. Chris sat up. "Did you hear that?" The knocking stopped. Silence. Emily tried to laugh it off, but unease gnawed at her, because when she glanced at the door again, she swore the knob was slowly turning. Morning came, with pale, desert light spilling through the blinds. Chris insisted the night before had just been her imagination, but Emily couldn't shake the image of the turning doorknob. At breakfast, if you could call it that, the continental spread was stale muffins and lukewarm coffee. Emily noticed the guest ledger again behind the counter. While the manager stepped away, she peeked. Most names were dated years ago. Many were crossed out. Some pages were blank, except for a single word scrawled across them: taken. Her stomach turned. She snapped the book shut as the manager returned, staring at her with that same oily smile. "You two settling in?" he asked softly. Chris forced a grin. "Yeah, thanks." They drove into town to sightsee, but there wasn't much to see. Every store was closed, every street eerily empty. It was as if Pine Hollow existed only for that motel. When they returned that evening, the parking lot held 3 other cars, but Emily never saw a single other guest. Not in the lobby, not in the halls. That night, she dreamed of voices whispering in the room. When she woke, Chris was gone. The bathroom light was off, his shoes still by the bed. The door to the room stood wide open. Emily called his name, her voice trembling. No answer. She ran into the hall, checked outside. Nothing. Chris's car still sat in the lot. Panicked, she went to the lobby. The manager sat behind the desk, reading a newspaper that looked decades old. "My boyfriend," she gasped. "He's missing." "Did you see him leave?" The man smiled faintly. "People leave all the time." "No, you don't understand." "He's gone." The man shrugged. "Then you're alone now." Emily backed away, horrified. She ran from door to door, banging, shouting Chris's name. Some doors creaked open, revealing empty, dust-filled rooms. Others wouldn't budge at all. Finally, she burst into room 4. Inside, the bed was unmade. A suitcase sat half-packed, and on the dresser, a purse, still full of cash, cards, ID, the name on it: Sarah Collins. Emily froze. The purse was pristine, untouched by dust, but the ID expired in 1998. Emily sprinted back to her room, heart hammering. The air felt heavier now, like the motel itself was breathing. Room 6 was dim, curtains drawn tight, even though she hadn't closed them. On the bed, something new lay across the blanket. A Polaroid photo. She picked it up with trembling hands. It showed her, sleeping. Emily dropped the photo, chest tight. Someone had been inside. Someone had taken that picture while she slept. She rushed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. But when she looked up, the mirror didn't show her reflection. Instead, she saw Chris, standing behind her, pale and wide-eyed, mouthing words she couldn't hear. She spun around. No one there. The light flickered, the mirror cracked, and then the bathroom door slammed shut by itself. Determined to escape, Emily grabbed her bag and bolted down the hall. The lobby was empty now, the manager gone. On the desk sat the ledger, open to a fresh page. Her name was already written there, not by her, not in her handwriting. She tore the page out, heart pounding. As she did, she noticed a door behind the counter, ajar, leading downward, a basement. Her instincts screamed to run, but something compelled her. She descended the creaking stairs into darkness, the air thick with mildew. At the bottom, the smell hit her. Rot. Rows of shelves lined the walls. On them, objects, purses, wallets, watches, suitcases, each neatly labeled with names. Chris's wallet was there, his watch. Emily's knees buckled, and then she saw it, a row of Polaroids pinned to the far wall. Every guest, smiling, asleep, screaming, each dated. Chris's photo was the last one, his face twisted in terror, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. The date was today. A sound echoed in the basement. Footsteps. Emily ducked behind the shelves, heart racing. The manager descended slowly, humming tunelessly, but he wasn't alone. Shadows moved with him. People. At least they looked like people. Their faces were wrong, distorted, hollow-eyed, their movements jerky, like puppets dragged by invisible strings. Some looked half-decayed, others strangely pristine, like wax figures. And among them, Chris. His eyes were empty, his skin pale, his smile too wide. Chris, Emily cried before she could stop herself. All the heads snapped toward her. The manager grinned. Now she's ready. The shadows surged forward. Emily bolted up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind her. She ran down the hall, searching desperately for an exit. Every door she opened led not outside, but to another motel room, some filled with dust, others filled with figures, waiting. Her own voice whispered from the darkness, "Stay, stay with us." Emily ran until her legs gave out. The motel had changed. The hallways twisted into impossible angles, repeating endlessly. Room numbers looped nonsensically. 5, 6, 7, then back to 5 again. Every mirror she passed showed not her reflection, but Chris, sometimes screaming, sometimes grinning, sometimes dead. She smashed one with her fist, cutting her hand. The glass fell away, revealing not a wall, but a window. Through it, she saw the basement again, shelves of belongings, rows of Polaroids, and herself, standing there, watching through the glass. Her double smiled and whispered, "You never checked out." Emily staggered back, blood dripping from her palm. The hall pulsed with dim red light now, as if the motel itself was alive, its walls breathing in and out. She pushed through another door and fell into darkness. Emily woke on the floor of room 6. The clock on the nightstand blinked 3 a.m. Her bag was gone. Her phone, too. Beside her, on the bed, lay the guest ledger. It was open to a fresh page. Her name filled the space, and beneath it, in the same dark ink, a single word: taken. The door creaked open. The manager stood there, smiling. Behind him, rows of shadowy figures, some familiar, some strangers, all hollow-eyed. Chris stepped forward. He reached out a pale hand. "Stay," he whispered. His voice was no longer his. It was dozens of voices layered into one. Emily screamed, slamming the door shut. She turned, desperate for another escape. But the room had no windows, no bathroom, no way out, just 4 walls closing in. The lights flickered, and then the Polaroid camera clicked. When police finally investigated Pine Hollow, years later, they found the motel empty, decaying, abandoned. No guests, no staff, but in the lobby, the ledger still sat on the counter, the last name written inside, Emily Carter, and every page after hers was blank. The old radio station sat on the edge of town, its tall red and white transmission tower blinking against the night sky. For decades, WZRD 103.7 FM had been the late-night companion of insomniacs, truckers, and lonely souls who needed voices in the darkness. But by 2023, the station was practically forgotten, except for a handful of listeners and the staff forced to run the graveyard shift. David Mercer, a 27-year-old DJ, had taken the night slot because it paid well and allowed him to work on his music during the day. He didn't mind the quiet, at least, not at first. His booth smelled faintly of dust and cigarette smoke, and the old soundboard crackled with life when he powered it up. A wall of CDs, vinyls, and outdated equipment lined the room. The station had been around since the 1950s, and much of it had never been replaced. WZRD 103.7 FM, your midnight soundtrack, David said into the mic, his voice calm and steady. If you're awake out there, you're not alone. The phone line blinked. Strange, calls usually didn't come until after 1 a.m. David pressed the button. WZRD, you're on the air. Silence, then a faint, crackling voice. Can you hear me? Yes, this is David. You're live. Who am I talking to? Help me. The line went dead. David leaned back, frowning. Probably a prank. He queued up another song, an old blues track, and tried to shake off the unease. But 20 minutes later, the line blinked again. ZRD, you're on the air. David, his stomach tightened. Who is this? You shouldn't be here. The voice was whispery, distorted, like it came from underwater. The line cut again. The next night, David arrived early. He asked Marla, the station manager, if prank calls were common. She laughed. At this hour, no one listens, let alone calls. Still uneasy, David began keeping a notebook. Each time the line blinked, he wrote down the time and the words he heard. By the third night, his entries looked like this: 12:42 a.m. Help me. 1:15 a.m. You shouldn't be here. 2:03 a.m. Room 3, 3:30 a.m. Incoherent sobbing. Waiter des a.m. Behind you. That last one made him freeze. He had turned slowly in his chair, half expecting to see someone standing in the booth. But the room was empty. The calls always cut out after a few seconds, and when he tried calling the number back, it didn't exist. By the end of the week, David wasn't sleeping well. He'd dream of voices in static, radios turning on by themselves, whispers echoing through the hallways of the station. One night, around 3 a.m., the voice was clearer than usual. A man's voice, low and ragged. "I used to work here." David's skin prickled. "Who are you?" "They didn't let me leave." The line clicked. Silence. David couldn't ignore it anymore. On his lunch break, he went digging through the station's archives. A dusty back room full of yellowed papers, old photos, and bound ledgers of call logs from decades past. He found a newspaper clipping from 1972. Local DJ found dead. In station fire. Cause unknown. The black and white photo showed a young man, headphones around his neck, smiling in front of the same booth David now worked in. His name, Alan Reeves. The article said Alan had died during his shift when a small fire broke out in the studio, but witnesses claimed they'd still heard his voice on the airwaves, even after the fire had started. Some insisted he'd kept broadcasting. David shivered. Back in the booth, he stared at the soundboard. His notebook lay open in front of him. The phone line blinked again. With a trembling hand, he pressed it. "David," the voice rasped. "Don't let them shut me off again." By week 2, the voices weren't confined to the phone anymore. Sometimes, while David played a track, whispers bled into the broadcast, low enough that listeners might think it was part of the music, but David could hear them clearly. "Stay with us. Don't leave. You are one of us now." On Friday night, a trucker called in, an actual living caller. "Hey, DJ, I just want to say your station's got weird vibes, man. Like, I swear I heard someone crying in the background during that last song. You okay in there?" David forced a laugh. "Yeah, must have been some interference." But when he checked the recording later, the crying was there. And underneath it, faint but undeniable, a man's voice saying, "Room 3. The station only had a few offices upstairs, along with a dusty storage closet and a forgotten break room, but there were no numbered rooms." David tried to laugh it off. Maybe the voice was referencing a hotel, a hospital, anything but the station itself. Still, curiosity gnawed at him. That night, after his shift, he wandered the empty halls. The fluorescent lights buzzed, flickering slightly, as if reluctant to stay on. He reached the end of the corridor, where a heavy wooden door sat half hidden behind an old filing cabinet. It wasn't marked. Dust coated the knob. David pulled, and to his surprise, the door opened with a long, protesting creak. Inside was a narrow staircase leading down into the basement. The station's basement wasn't on the building map. A sickly smell of mildew and burnt wood drifted upward. David hesitated, but forced himself down. The steps groaned under his weight. At the bottom, a hallway stretched out, lined with doors. Each one bore a faded brass number. David froze at the third door. His hand shook as he touched the knob. It was warm. From inside, he heard it. A faint scratching sound. Then a whisper, "Come in." He bolted up the stairs, slamming the hidden door shut behind him. The following broadcasts grew worse. Now there wasn't just one voice, but several, overlapping, layered, like a choir of broken transmissions. Sometimes, they argued, "Stay with us." "No, leave him. He belongs here. He's not ready." Other times, they chanted in unison, "Room 3, Room 3, Room 3. David's notebook filled with frantic scribbles. His handwriting grew messier each night. Letters scrawled like he'd written them half asleep. He circled Room 3 dozens of times. One night, he brought his friend Kelly, another DJ, to witness it. Look, I'm telling you, the calls are real. Kelly smirked. Man, you need sleep. But at 3:15 a.m., right on schedule, the phone line blinked. David answered. David, the voice moaned. Kelly laughed nervously. Who is this? Come on, prank's over. The voice sharpened. Kelly. Her smile vanished. How do they know my... The line cut. Kelly didn't laugh again. She left before the shift ended and refused to come back. David couldn't stop thinking about the DJ from the 1970s. Alan Reeves, the one who died in the fire. He dug deeper into the archives. He found fragments of old broadcasts, preserved on reel-to-reel tapes. Most were standard fare. Music, weather updates. But one tape, dated the night of the fire, chilled him to the bone. Alan's voice crackled. If you're hearing this, they won't let me leave. I thought it was just calls, just lonely voices in the night. But they're here, inside the walls, inside the wires. They're in the frequency itself. There was a pause, then a scream, then static. The tape ended. David sat in the booth, clutching the reel. Sweat trickled down his neck. The phone line blinked. David, help us finish the broadcast. It was just past 2 a.m. when the power cut. The station plunged into darkness. Only the red standby light on the transmitter glowed faintly. David's heart raced. He pulled out his phone flashlight, but the beam sputtered. The soundboard came alive on its own, knobs twisting, sliders moving as if manipulated by unseen hands. The speakers filled with static. Beneath it, faint voices rose. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Some sobbed, some screamed. Others whispered his name. David, join us. Finish the show. The hidden door at the end of the hall creaked open. He didn't want to go, but his body moved like a puppet, drawn toward the basement. Each step felt heavier, the air thicker, as though the building itself wanted to hold him there. When he reached the third door, it was already open. Inside, a dim red light pulsed, like the glow of an old on-air sign. The voices grew deafening. David stepped inside. The room was small, its walls scorched black, as though a fire had once consumed everything inside. Yet there were no ashes, no debris. Instead, at the center of the room stood an old microphone, dented and rusted, resting on a pedestal. Above it, the red on-air light flickered, though no wires connected it to anything. David's breath quickened. Hello? He whispered. The microphone crackled. His own voice boomed back at him through invisible speakers, distorted, delayed. Hello. Then another voice layered over his, male, deep, broken with static. I waited for you. A figure flickered into view, faint, ghostly, seated at the mic. A man in a plaid shirt, headphones around his neck. Alan Reeves. You took my shift. Alan rasped. Now it's yours. David staggered backward. No, I didn't. This isn't real. Alan stood, his movements jerky, like frames skipping in a film reel. They keep us here. The voices, they won't stop until someone is on the air. Forever. Behind Alan, shadows writhed along the walls, faceless figures pressing against the blackened plaster, whispering, moaning, clawing. You can leave, Alan said. His eyes glowed faint red, like embers. But you'll bring them with you. Or you can stay, and they'll let you keep broadcasting. David's pulse hammered. And if I refuse? Alan's grin was a jagged slash. Then they'll do to you what they did to me. The shadows surged closer, filling the room with whispers. Stay, stay, stay. David bolted from the room, slamming the door. He sprinted upstairs, into the booth, gasping for air. His soundboard sparked, lights flashing red. The phone line blinked furiously, every line at once. Though only one phone existed, he pressed the button. David. It was his own voice. Don't run. Sit down. Finish the show. The studio walls pulsed as though alive. The ceiling dripped condensation that smelled of smoke. David ripped off his headphones. He grabbed his bag, ran for the exit, only to find the front doors sealed shut, the glass now mirrors reflecting his pale, terrified face. The phone rang again, louder, relentless. Against his will, his hand lifted the receiver. Welcome back to WZRD 103.7 FM, his voice said on the other end. You're on the air. Days passed. Weeks. The station manager came in one morning to find the booth locked from the inside. Music played. Voices whispered between tracks. But no one answered knocks at the door. Listeners called the station, unnerved by the broadcast. Some swore they heard multiple DJs talking over each other, though only David had been scheduled. Others claimed to hear their own names, whispered through the static. Marla eventually gave up trying to open the booth. She assumed David had quit, vanished like so many others in that town. But every night, at exactly midnight, the same voice came on the air, calm, steady, soothing. This is WZRD 103.7 FM. If you're awake out there, you're not alone. If you listened closely enough, though you could hear others behind him, Alan Reeves, the sobbing voices, the chants, a chorus of the lost, and if you kept listening long enough, you might hear your own voice joining them. The Hollow Creek house was everything the Miller family thought they wanted. A sprawling Victorian tucked away in a wooded clearing just outside a quiet New England town. Its steep gables, wraparound porch, and stained glass windows made it look like something from a postcard. James Miller, a history professor, had fallen in love with the place the moment he saw it listed online. His wife, Laura, had been hesitant. Why was it so cheap compared to other homes in the area? But James brushed off her concerns. Old houses had charm, and he was sure he could restore it. Their kids, Sophie, age 12, and Ethan, age 9, were thrilled. Sophie loved the idea of having her own attic bedroom, while Ethan was excited about the backyard woods. When they arrived with moving boxes, the realtor handed over the brass key with a smile too forced, too wide. Congratulations, she said, voice flat. The Hollow Creek house is unique. James laughed nervously. We'll make it a home. But when the family stepped inside, the air felt heavy. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet as though groaning. The wallpaper peeled in strange, curling patterns that almost looked like faces. Sophie whispered, "It feels like the house is watching us." Laura shushed her, but she felt it too. The first week went smoothly enough. They unpacked, settled in, and James began his obsession, researching the house's history. Built in 1893 by a wealthy merchant, it had passed through multiple owners, most of whom stayed less than a decade. Records grew fuzzy after the 1950s. Meanwhile, the kids started complaining. At night, Sophie said she heard scratching in the walls, not like mice, too deliberate, too slow. Ethan swore he heard footsteps in the hallway outside his room, though when James checked, no one was there. Laura dismissed it as adjustment jitters. Old houses make noises, she told them. But one evening, while folding laundry, Laura heard it herself. A faint whisper, low and breathy, drifting from behind the plaster. Laura, she froze, heart pounding. Laura, stay. When James came into the room, the sound stopped. He teased her gently. You've been reading too many ghost stories. But Laura didn't laugh. By the second week, they began noticing something impossible. The house didn't stay the same. A hallway Laura had walked 100 times suddenly ended with a door that hadn't been there before. When she opened it, she found a narrow closet filled with dust-covered children's toys from decades past. Sophie swore her attic bedroom window had been on the left side of the wall one night, and on the right, the next. James brushed it off as imagination, but then he found himself lost one evening, turning corner after corner in his own home until he ended up in the basement instead of the kitchen. The house seemed to be rearranging itself. James became excited. It's architecture we don't understand. Some kind of design anomaly. This is fascinating. Laura wasn't convinced. She had started locking the kids' doors at night. Not to keep anything out, but to keep the children from wandering. Because sometimes, in the dead of night, the sound of a door opening echoed through the halls, and when she checked, all the doors were still shut. One rainy afternoon, Ethan vanished. Laura panicked, calling his name, searching every room. Sophie cried, insisting she'd seen him go into the wall. James finally found him in the basement, standing before a door they'd never seen before, wooden, with an iron handle that was ice cold. Ethan's eyes were glazed, his voice flat. It wanted me to come play. Laura yanked him back. The door vanished as soon as it closed. That night, James tried to rationalize. Maybe we missed the door before. This house is huge. But Laura couldn't shake the chill of Ethan's blank stare. Later, after everyone was asleep, she crept into the hallway, and there it was again. The same door, this time slightly ajar. From the crack, she swore she saw an eye staring back at her. After the basement incident, Laura demanded they leave. We can't stay here, James. Something's wrong with this place. But when they packed bags and tried to drive out the long dirt road, they found themselves looping. The path led them back to the house again and again, no matter which turn they took. It's just the storm, James said, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. Fog can play tricks. But Laura saw the truth in his eyes. He was scared too. When they returned, the house almost seemed to sigh in relief. The lights flickered back on by themselves. A window upstairs creaked open, as if it were glad they hadn't escaped. Sophie had always been a quiet, imaginative child, but in the Hollow Creek house, her behavior shifted. Laura found her writing constantly in a small, leather-bound diary. When asked, Sophie said, "The house tells me things." Laura flipped through the diary one night and froze. The pages were filled with detailed sketches of rooms that didn't exist, spiraling staircases, endless corridors, doors that opened into black voids. In the margins, Sophie had scribbled words like, "It wants us to stay. The walls are hungry, room for more." When Laura confronted her, Sophie's eyes seemed distant. "It doesn't like it when you read my notes." Before Laura could ask more, every light in the house went out at once. James, determined to find answers, returned to town to dig deeper into the property records. What he discovered unsettled even him. Since 1893, nearly every family that had lived in the Hollow Creek house had vanished, not sold the property, not moved, vanished, their belongings left behind, their cars rusting in the driveway. Each disappearance was chalked up to abandonment. But there were whispers. Locals spoke of the house that ate people. When James returned with the news, Laura snapped, "And you brought us here. You saw the price was too good to be true." Before they could argue more, Ethan interrupted. "Stop yelling," he whispered. "It doesn't like it when you fight." The house grew restless. Doors slammed on their own. Windows opened in the dead of night, letting in cold drafts that smelled of damp soil. Shadows stretched too far, bending at impossible angles. One night, James woke to find himself standing in the hallway without remembering how he'd gotten there. At the end of the corridor, the same iron-handled door appeared again. This time, it was wide open. Inside, he saw movement, figures shifting in the darkness. He heard voices, dozens of them, whispering all at once, "Stay, stay, stay." James slammed the door shut and stumbled back to bed, heart hammering. But when he looked beside him, the bed was empty. Laura was gone. James stumbled through the hallway, heart pounding, calling for Laura. The walls seemed to stretch, twisting into impossible angles. Doors appeared where there had been walls. Hallways ended in blank surfaces, then reopened into spaces he didn't recognize. He realized, with a sickening certainty, that the house was alive, breathing, watching, deciding where they could and couldn't go. From somewhere above, he heard the soft padding of footsteps. Laura's, perhaps, but slower, hesitant, echoing unnaturally. When he ran toward the sound, he found himself back in the basement, staring once again at the iron-handled door. It had grown taller, wider, blacker than before. Shadows writhed just beyond the threshold. A voice, faint and childlike, whispered from inside, "Come play with us." Inside the blackened room, James saw them, figures of children, pale and faceless, frozen mid-motion. Some held toys, some pointed, some were laughing without sound. Their eyes, empty hollows, seemed to draw James in, tugging at his mind. Sophie's voice cut through the air. "Daddy, don't be afraid." He turned. She was there, but not quite. Her expression was blank, her movements jerky, like a marionette. "They want us," she whispered. "We're supposed to stay forever." James stumbled back, heart hammering. The house's walls groaned. Floorboards shifted beneath him. Doors slammed shut behind him, cutting off any chance of retreat. Suddenly, the house seemed to pulse. The floors expanded and contracted. Hallways stretched like sinews. Windows appeared on the ceilings, doors on the floors. The walls themselves seemed to inhale and exhale. James understood. The Hollow Creek house wasn't just haunted, it was predatory. It had been built to trap, to feed on fear, on life, on presence. Families didn't leave because the house didn't allow it. The voices grew louder, overlapping, chanting, "Stay, stay, stay." He tried to grab his family, but they were gone. Only Sophie's diary floated to his feet, pages flipping on their own. One page remained open, words scrawled in his daughter's hand. "We belong to it now." James ran, searching for an exit that didn't exist. The main door dissolved into shadow. The staircase to the attic twisted upward infinitely. He tried breaking windows. They rippled like water. Finally, he found the iron-handled door again. A deep, resonant voice emanated from inside. Enter, or become one with the house. The figures of previous occupants appeared behind him, whispering, tugging, urging him forward. The shadows of Laura and Ethan reached for him. Desperate, he stepped into the room. The door slammed shut behind him, and everything went black. Weeks later, the real estate agent returned to Hollow Creek. The house sat quiet, its Victorian facade serene in the sunlight. No smoke, no signs of damage, no indication of horror within. A new family arrived, eager to move in. They were shown the house, impressed by its charm. The listing remained the same as it had for decades. Spacious Victorian home, affordable, peaceful, ideal for families. And if you were patient enough, you might hear faint whispering through the walls, a voice calling your name, a soft giggle from the attic. The Hollow Creek house waits, patiently, eternally.